This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Want to know another Snapple fact? The first hot air balloon passengers were a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. Ridiculous. Check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavored Snapple near you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Outward, Slate's podcast that is recovering a little from June and, sliding delicately into July, but with, and I calculated this, 50% more LGBT goodness for you. That's right. The whole gang is back together for this episode, so I want to do a proper roll call. First of all, this is Jules Gill-Peterson coming to you. Who else is on this call? Who's here?
Well, this is Bryan Louder. I'm on this call as well. And I think the most important person that's on this call is...
Hi, guys. I'm Christina Cotterucci. Thank you for having me back. It feels like home. I'm so happy to have our pride, as it were, back together. Did you miss me at all or anything?
Did we miss you? Oh, my God. I don't know.
Just wondering.
I don't know how we made it, Jules. What, I don't know. But most of those shows were just terrible. I
listened to them. They were so good. I was like, wow, they really don't need me, actually.
No.
So thank you for welcoming me back.
No, we're so glad to have you back, but also so proud.
Yes.
I've just been beaming over here, not to mention listening following with great delight. So thank you for coming back and gracing us with your podcast graces.
Yeah, huge congratulations on Slow Burn, Christina. It's just been, I know our listeners are probably all listening to it, and if you're not, you should be. Slow Burn, Gays Against Briggs, go listen to that, but it's really an achievement, and it's just been so exciting to see it out in the world, so congrats.
Thank you so much. It's been, a really wonderful Pride season because of that. And just happy to be back, excited to be back in normal gay swing of things. And it was also, I get the sense that there's a lot of news outlets that are like, oh, it's Pride Month. We're going to do all of our queer things this month. And with Outward, I'm like, oh, no, we actually get to do this every week all year round, which is so refreshing.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. It's like a gay Christmas can actually come in December. So it's a little switcheroo thing for you. I mean, that's actually kind of the perfect segue because, we have just wrapped up the 1 month where famously everyone is contractually obliged to, be at least a little bit gay. But look, Christina and Bryan, did you know that some animal species are actually gay the entire year, just like us here on Outward? That's the thesis statement of some new documentaries that we're going to talk about today. This is your Gay Animals episode. First, there's a documentary film called Queer Planet, which debuted on Peacock. It's narrated by the actor Andrew Rannells, and it presents a kind of whirlwind of animal life from a bunch of different places on our planet, both on land and underwater. So, got the range, where apparently animals are pretty much just like us in the sense that they're very into gay sex, both monogs and poly, and into changing sex too. But actually, I think Queer Planet, this documentary, maybe makes its case in the reverse of that order, suggesting that humans actually lag behind other species in our attitudes about homo and trans biodiversity. So that's one. And then second, there's actually a new podcast series called A Field Guide to Gay Animals, hosted by Owen Evers and Lane Kaplan-Levinson, which takes listeners truly outside with them in search of what our animal friends are up to and how we might ask some questions about our creaturely cousins and their relationships to us, our relationships to them. A Field Guide to Gay Animals was an official selection at this year's Tribeca Film Festival. So I know all three of us have a lot to say about the gay animals, but also about this kind of burst of gay animal programming across mediums. Like, what's going on? Why are we doing all the gay animals right now? So stick around, whether you're, more of a furry or a fishy, or if you're like me, a lizard queen, because it has been a scaly. That's actually really offensive, Christina. Well, but you know what? It's been a while since the three of us sat down, talked through some gay media. So it's going to be a good one. But along with the parade of animals, we'll have your monthly updates to the gay agenda and our usual rounds of pride and provocations. But first, we have something from the old Thoughts and Queries mailbag to discuss, right, Bryan?
We do. We actually have a sort of crossover entry to our Thoughts and Queries mailbag from listener Paul, who wrote in about Slow Burn and wanted us to address something about that show over here on Outward. So I'll just read his note. I'm loving the season of Slow Burn and enjoying the advocacy it's receiving on Outward. I believe that the late, great Harvey Milk is a titan of the fight to achieve equality in America and that his face belongs on a monument alongside Abraham Lincoln and Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. But like Lincoln and King, Milk was human and made mistakes. His mania to out as many people as possible had one very conspicuous victim, Oliver Sipple, the man who saved President Gerald Ford from assassination in 1975 and was crucified for his heroism. And Paul went on to ask us to just sort of talk about this and address it on the show. He was worried that people may not know about this story, which I confess I didn't, actually. This was something I had to read up on. Christina, I think you did sort of know about it, or at least came upon it in your research for Slow Burn. So can you just tell us sort of what happened to Oliver?
Yeah. First of all, I love a thought or query that opens with a compliment for me. So thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, I did come across this in my research. We didn't have time to include it as sort of a tangent in Slow Burn. But, you know, one of Harvey Milk's big political messages was everyone has to come out to everyone they know. This is the only way we're going to achieve civil rights and protections and any measure of safety in society is if people know that we're everywhere. And so, you know, this was a big part of his campaign to defeat the Briggs Initiative, the subject of season 9 of Slow Burn, Gays Against Briggs. But back in 1975, even before Harvey Milk was an elected official and years before the Briggs Initiative, Oliver Sipple saved Gerald Ford's life. He grabbed the arm of the woman who was going to shoot him with a gun. And he was a gay man who was involved in one of Harvey Milk's initial losing campaigns for supervisor. So Harvey knew he was gay. He was out in San Francisco. And he thought, you know, the world needs to know that the person who saved the president's life was gay. Gay people are a boon to their communities and not a danger to them. And this is sort of like the biggest act of heroism someone could commit. So he was one of, I think, a couple people who tipped off a San Francisco columnist that Oliver Sipple was gay. The columnist outed Oliver, who, you know, the national news media picked up on the story. It got back to his family in Detroit, who they became estranged. His family was sort of harassed and mocked by their own community. They didn't have a relationship with Oliver for quite some time. And Oliver Sipple was pissed about it. And he actually sued the newspapers for reporting on it, for invading his privacy. The case was dismissed, but, you know, it had a really negative impact on his life. And he certainly didn't want to be outed. So it is really complicated. I think we've been having this conversation in queer communities for decades about what are the ethics of outing a public official. In this case, Oliver Sipple, was he a public official? Like, he didn't really ask for that sort of fame. Fame was thrust upon him. And so that makes it even more complicated. But yeah, I mean, Harvey Milk this is a part of him that actually gets glossed over a lot, is he was a pretty controversial figure. A lot of people didn't like the way he went about doing what he was doing. And even the act of coming out, which now today doesn't seem radical at all, there were a lot of people at that time, especially older gays, who didn't want people to come out. They were happy living, or, you know, happy-ish, living their quiet, closeted lives, and thought if people know gay people are everywhere, they're going to know that I'm gay. They're going to be suspicious of two women living together. So I appreciated this note, and I do think it's a really interesting side of Harvey Milk. You know, I tried to show his complexity in the season, but yeah, the Oliver Sipple story is a really interesting one.
So fascinating. And, you know, this is maybe less of a historical comment than I'm used to making. But, you know, Gerald Ford would probably rank pretty low on my list of presidents I would associate with anything, even just vibes-wise, gay. So I didn't know this little entry. Appreciate the chance for us to get more acquainted.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Oliver Sipple never got invited to the White House or anything you might expect of somebody who literally saved the president's life. And so part of Harvey Milk's thinking was, it's because Oliver Sipple is gay.
Interesting.
When I was reading up on this, one of the things that was surprising about it was to find that Ford not only didn't, formally invite him to the White House or thank him really, aside from I think he wrote him a letter, but also the guy, there's another person, a taxi driver, I think, who got hit by the bullet. So when it was deflected from Ford, it actually hit somebody else. And he never got anything from Ford either. So he was kind of pissed about it also. So sounds like Gerald Ford didn't handle any of that very well. But yeah, I mean, I think this is just a great reminder, like you said, Christina, that outing is complicated and it, is not always a positive strategy for everyone. And I think that's something we've been talking about on the show too. Even now, it's like, is visibility, maybe is the word we might use, actually the best strategy for everybody at all times, and maybe not. So this is a great historical reminder of that was certainly true even at the birth of that idea. So thank you to Paul for sending that in. We love our thoughts and queries. Please send more. We love advice letters. We love thoughts. We love queries, any of those things. And we'd love to hear your voices. So we can get voice memos. That's amazing. But emails are also fine. And you can send those to outwardpodcast@slate.com.
Well, I don't know about you two, but I do think it is time for some prides and or provocations. So, Christina, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I've been really excited to share this pride. I've been thinking about it a lot. So, I'm feeling really proud of. I actually don't know who this person is, but Martha Ann Alito's neighbors across the lagoon. So we learned a few weeks ago that Martha Ann Alito was having some trouble getting into the pride spirit last month. So this is the wife of Samuel Alito, the ultra-conservative Supreme Court justice. And Martha Ann was taking some flack for her interest in flags. First, she flew 2 flags that were linked to the January 6th insurrectionists and the sort of whole Stop the Steal milieu. And then she was secretly recorded by somebody who was posing as a conservative supporter, saying she was so upset that she had to look across the lagoon at the pride flag for the next month because one of her neighbors was flying it proudly. So I don't know who these people are who fly it, but I love them. Anyway, Martha Ann was so incensed that she promised when the hubbub dies down about all this flag stuff, she's going to send those queers, or I guess allies, a message every day with a different flag. She said she was going to make her own flag with the Sacred Heart of Jesus on it, which is actually a little bit of a metal symbol, plus flames and the word shame in Italian. Super gay.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. Italian? Okay,
that's campy.
Italian.
So I find it really beautiful, thank you to Martha Ann's neighbors, that even in this moment where we're in a weird place where like corporations are still co-opting it for their own ends, but also we have like Josh Hawley saying that government buildings should replace it with the 10 Commandments. The flag has just become both super banal and this really intense flashpoint. And so I'm just still proud that it holds enough power to drive Martha Ann Alito up a wall. And I hope that her neighbors across the lagoon fly it year round. That would make me even more proud.
Hear, hear.
Absolutely.
The lagoon.
May we all be so lucky to be people identified as being across a lagoon.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic. I just
proximate.
love it. I don't know what lagoon
to a lagoon.
this is.
Also, there's something very Italian about a lagoon, too. What about you, Bryan? How are you feeling?
We didn't get to do a sort of proper set of pride and provocations last month just because of the way we recorded things. And so I wanted to get a sort of an earnest pride in here just after June. So listeners may know that I'm from a town in South Carolina called Rock Hill. I'm not claiming to speak for it, but I know that it's still got a lot of conservative Southern small town energy, right? That's still the vibe in a lot of ways, which is why I have been so happy to see a grassroots pride festival emerged there over the last 4 years, I think it is. And it really embodies the best of what pride can be. I think the thing to note is that the folks who organize this have approached the city every year to try to get permits and sponsorship to sort of to do the thing, and the city has refused. Yeah. This is in 2024, 2021, I think, to 2024. So no support, no permitting from the city, put on by volunteers and small businesses like, in the community that want to support and create space for queer people. This means that their march, for example, has to be on the sidewalks instead of the street because they can't get the street closed, but they do it anyway. And the photos are full of beautiful queerdos and families and kids and drag queens. And this one person with a fantastic sign that said, "The Lorax speaks for the trees and the trees say, duck you." wonderful queer sentiment there. Lorax is maybe like a non-binary icon. I don't know.
Totally.
Something like that. There's also a trash can they put out inviting people to dispose of their hate in it, which I thought was cute. And they have cute events. It's like, drag bingo and story hour and a kids parade. All of these are kind of brave, right? Like in this climate. So anyway, it's just so cool to see this kind of thing. And, of course I get a little weepy about it because if it had existed when I was a teenager, it might have really made a difference for me. But I'm happy that it's there now. If you're in the area and you want to go or know more about it, or if you just want to support it, you can check out rockhillpride.com.
That's so wonderful. I'm getting a little weepy thinking about that.
Yeah. Jules, what do you have?
Well, I also have a very literal pride. And in this case, I'm proud of someone as just sort of a shameless way to plug something that I think is great that they've done. So I'm proud of Solomon J. Brager, who is the author of an incredible new graphic memoir called Heavyweight, A Family Story of the Holocaust, Empire, and Memory that just came out from publisher William Morrow. Solomon, someone I knew like back in the day when I lived in Brooklyn, and Solomon has become really just stunning like graphic artist, like just like beautiful visuals here, but has written this really, really, really exciting book that thinks through just really like the fascination that they had from a young age being told stories of escape from the Holocaust, and then over the course of their adolescence, young adulthood, coming to grips with like the real complexity that was often elided in some of the intense emotions there. And it's this like book that thinks through some of the imperial histories actually, encoded in the ways stories were handed down to them that weren't always obvious. So those kinds of questions obviously have a real particular resonance right now. And I just, it looks just like a beautiful, thoughtful, really interesting intervention in this genre that I think, there's like quite a few graphic memoirs that go back a number of years that kind of like hang out in this area of historical memory and like historical trauma. So really, really, really excited to sit down and read it. And yeah, I'm feeling the pride, but also wanted to take the chance to just recommend to folks to head out to wherever fine books are sold and get yourself a copy of Heavyweight because I think you'll really enjoy it. Now that we have thoroughly explored our prides and provocations, I think it's time for a little break. But when we're back, I promise we've got a lot of animals and some of them might be gay.
Have you heard the term nuclear family? The phrase was coined by an anthropologist in the 1920s to describe the family structure of a straight married couple and their kids. Now, over a century later, only about 18% of Americans actually live in a family by that definition. That means that over 82% of Americans represent different kinds of family. From This Is Actually Happening comes The 82% Modern Stories of Love and Family, a special 6-part series focused on those who have broken away from the norm and challenged society's notions, from an asexual educator and activist raising a child with 2 other co-parents, to a gay man in the clergy who chose the path of celibacy and created a unique family unit with his straight best friend. Each episode offers an intimate first-person perspective from those whose family lives have taken different shapes. To listen to the 82% series, follow This Is Actually Happening on the Wondery app, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to This Is Actually Happening ad-free on Wondery Plus.
What's the history of cannabis legalization? It traces back to San Francisco's 1980s AIDS crisis. We hear from a pioneering AIDS doctor on how cannabis was helping patients, and from the woman running the biggest cannabis operation in San Francisco at the time.
I never felt, I'm going to get AIDS and die. I just felt like I can be of some help.
This is AIDS and Cannabis, a 3-part series on how to do the pot. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
All right, we are back. So sometimes the universe, or maybe in this case I should say a big gay stork, drops a topic into our laps. Early in June, we realized that this Pride Month was going to see an upsurge in queer animal programming. This is all through, the kind of press releases and things we get. I noticed that this was going to be a theme, and the 2 big ones were a Peacock documentary called Queer Planet and the new podcast, A Field Guide to Gay Animals. Our curiosity was piqued. Of course, everyone loves cute memes about gay penguins, and I kind of enjoyed hearing about bighorn sheep thruples getting it on or whatever. But these pieces of media take the topic more seriously, presenting the scientific fact of same-sex relations and gender diversity in nature as somehow politically important or relevant to us. Maybe it's clear that these shows are trying to make an argument. And the more I consumed the doc and the pod, the more questions I had about what the aims of this Look at the Gay Animals project might be and why it's happening now in 2024. I think I have more pages of notes with exclamation points next to them than for any other conversation we've had in recent memory.
Oh my gosh.
So I suspect we have a lot to talk about this topic. So let's get into it. Before we zoom out to any of those sort of more political or philosophical questions, I do think it's sort of fair to the shows to take a few minutes to discuss each thing separately. So I think we should start with Queer Planet. Let's listen to a clip for our listeners. You'll be hearing narrator Andrew Rannells, who for whatever reason decided that Boys in the Band Bitchy Queen was the right tone to take in this nature doc. So take a listen.
Our planet is home to over 11 million species. The paparazzi really are everywhere.
Everything you were taught as a kid is wrong.
You make me wanna dance! Gay penguins, bisexual lions, sex-changing clownfish.
This is a queer planet.
Okay, we're back. I guess I just want to start with initial reactions. How did y'all feel about this? Maybe in terms of style, content, Rannells, rainbows encircling the earth. Were there any favorite animals that you met? I'd love to hear about Queer Planet reactions.
I watched this with my wife, who said, it feels like Nat Geo had like a bunch of extra sex footage that they couldn't include in their normal programming. And then this is just using all of that. I actually did think it was kind of interesting to see animals having sex, which you don't often see on regular nature documentaries. But I was so turned off by the scripting and the narration. I think the sort of talking heads people I mostly enjoyed. I thought they were all smart scientists and whatever, but describing a penguin, like, can you believe this penguin has to find his mate at the largest circuit party ever? Like, it felt extremely patronizing to me. Like, as a queer, I can't be expected to consume a documentary if like someone's not talking to me in gay jokes all the time. And the like anthropomorphizing of animals and ascribing identity to them as opposed to just sexual behavior really rubs me the wrong way, because it's not, it feels infantilizing to humans. And I think it also kind of blurs the topic that we're trying to talk about, or like the message, I guess, which it clearly does have, which is that, animals do it. It's natural. So it's natural when we do it too. But the format that this was delivered in was really pretty offensive to me.
Yeah. Y'all, this one was so hard for me. But like, some of that's my fault. I am legitimately, the history of science, including the history of like evolutionary biology, is something I've spent a lot of time studied.
Yeah. Evolutionary biology. Yeah. That's interesting to think of in this context.
We're going to talk about Darwin at a certain point. Yeah.
Thank goodness. I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about Darwin. And, academics like in the humanities and also in the hard sciences have been writing about #gay or trans animals for, maybe even more than a decade or two at this point. So there's, been some very esoteric conversations that I've been a part of for a long time. But I agree, Christina. I think that was really well said. Actually, just tonally, I felt like genuinely offended by the documentary. Like, it was just sort of talking down to me. I mean, narratively, it didn't really make any sense. Like, the thesis of the documentary is that the classic animal behavioral scientists in the 19th century, the Victorians, the Darwin era people, made a mistake. They projected their heteronormative or gender assumptions onto the animal world, and that led them to make a series of scientific errors that were then reflected back to us. But then, like, the documentary just does the exact same thing. It projects like 2024 gay and trans, like college-educated American and British customs onto animals, and is like, look, this is the actual real truth. And I'm like, do you really think the viewer can't like pick that apart? And again, that's just a matter of conception, right? It's like not any of the particular animals in the film are not at fault, neither are any of the particular humans. But I was just like, I kind of ended up in the same place as you, Bryan. I was sort of like, I'm so interested to know what it is that feels compelling, like to when things like this get greenlit. Because if like, I understand that an appeal to nature, it's the ultimate normative claim. Like if something is natural, then it cannot per se be wrong. But like, there's no evidence that those kinds of claims like have been efficacious for like anyone, like ever, basically. But even if they were, I'm like, what feels good about looking, at giraffes and being like, oh, they are just like me? Or, for me, looking at a clownfish and being like, that is she's such a doll. No, she's not. Like, if another animal dies, the temperature changes, like, she changes sex. That's not what I'm doing.
And it feels a little bit like, I don't really care if what I'm doing is natural or not, And like you said, I don't think it's a compelling political argument per se. Although I feel after watching these and listening to these things, I feel maybe a little bit more convinced in this like weird ass time we're living in right now. But I did find it genuinely interesting. I think I knew that like same-sex animals humped each other, and of course they do. But I did learn quite a bit from both of these projects about really how non-normative heterosexuality, if we want to call that, is in the animal kingdom, and how there really is. I mean, even like the sort of biological sex part of it was a lot more interesting to me, because I think we don't get a lot of information about that. And that feels more like surprising to me than animals without any sort of social stigma to sexuality would want to just do whatever feels good, even if that involves like, sticking my penis in a male's blowhole or whatever.
I don't think that happened on camera.
What do you think?
I think you're making up that example.
It should have.
I didn't see that one. Yeah, I didn't see that one. No, I'm actually relieved to hear you guys say this, because when I sort of proposed this topic to the group after we saw that these things were coming, I kind of did it with the idea that it was going to be more of a fun thing, that I did not go in with like a desire to be offended. And Jules, I thought your point about it sort of recapitulating the Victorian era is so well taken, because it does bring in, and I want our listeners to understand this, like everything is described in very human terms. We've got pansexual primates. We've got macaques that are described as political lesbians, if I'm not mistaken. You've got the penguins at the circuit party that you mentioned, Christina. There's birds that are drag queens. It's really weird. And the more it goes on, the weirder it felt to me. At first I was like, oh, maybe it's a joke, right? Maybe it's just sort of tongue in cheek. But no, I think it really was doing this very strange maneuver of imposing sort of our current LGBT et al. Framework onto nature in a very strange way. And I found it kind of concerning. So that is definitely my reaction. And it's hard for me to imagine watching it not feeling that way, but maybe people did. One thing I wanted to flag before we move on to the podcast, because I do want to get that in here to talk about alongside this, is there's this academic question, right? You do get the sense from these queer academics and zoo professionals and whatnot that are interviewed that they feel really oppressed in their fields and think that this information has been closeted, right? Like, is I think a word they would use, and the research discouraged. Was that surprising to you all, or how did you sort of feel about that part? Because I did empathize with them, even though I hated the framing of the show. It's clear that they have like a struggle.
The other thing that lurks for me is actually race. And that might seem weird, but the fact sort of is that the history of Western science, the history of the natural sciences and of evolutionary biology in particular, the study of sex, as in sexual differentiation and sexual reproduction, is like primarily, subordinate to projects of race science. Like sexuality and reproduction are the thing that like produce racial differences, produce different phenotypes of animals, and like the history of race science and eugenics actually largely comes out of a lot of these same scientists. And for them, gender and sexuality was not like, the point was not for Victorians to that they just loved heterosexuality or the difference between men and women so much that they just wanted to reinforce those norms. The point was to prove scientifically, according to them, the superiority of the Anglo-Saxon sex and race, in which men and women were the most different from one another, in which the function of reproduction was to reproduce the nation and by extension the white race. Like, it's sort of weird to do a kind of celebration version of the fact that some of that sex could be like gay, and not talk about like the historical function of race there. It's just weird to me. But like, it's not obvious, right? But I think that's a really interesting subject. But I think it's important if you're going to talk about, like, just to say American and British science, like, there's only one particular worldview on animal behavior. It's not the only one that has ever existed in the entire world, right? And it's interesting to me that a lot of evolutionary biology, particularly the stuff that does go head to head with Darwin's legacy, often really does still do this thing where it argues that, like, quote unquote gay and trans animals have to have like a social purpose, that they are, for example, altruistic, right? Like the gay uncle thesis. We see it in the documentary film. So the penguins, when the male penguins adopt an egg, that's good. It's like they're gay in order to help ensure the survival of the larger penguin colony, right? When the clownfish, medically transition or organically transitions, it changes sex. It's to save the family unit, right? To perpetuate itself. Right, and the analogy is then made that, well, for humans too, right? We can only be gay or engage, in fact, in gay sexual behavior or transsexual, embodied behaviors in order to further the survival of the entire species. And that to me is just like objectionable, right? I don't have gay sex and change sex to further the collective reproduction of the species. That is like the white supremacist, like 19th century is calling. And so it's just like, there actually is a lot of science trying to argue that, like, we have value because we actually are subordinate to the, like, the most heavy structures that humans have constructed, not animals. Sorry, these animals don't have societies. Like, come at me, people in the comments. Like, they don't.
Let's actually take a moment to bring the podcast into the chat, because we've referenced it a few times now, and I just want our listeners to know what we're talking about. It's called A Field Guide to Gay Animals, and like Jules said at the top of the show, it's hosted by animal enthusiasts Owen Ever and Lane Kaplan-Levinson, and it includes sort of the expert interviews and like fun zoo scenes you'd expect, while trying to uncover the queerness that's hidden or not so hidden, right, in the animal world. And one thing that I want to note about it that's really interesting is it sort of relies on this tome called Biological Exuberance, Animal Homosexuality and Natural Diversity, which was published in 1993 by Bruce Bagamill. And they use it as this kind of guide, both to the animals themselves and to the sort of institutional collusion that the hosts feel has kept the public from appreciating queerness in animals. I should happen to have a copy of it. They talk about it as a thing that's sort of secretly passed among friends, and actually a dear friend drag queen gave me this years ago as a birthday present. So this is true. I can verify that. And it is fascinating. And so, I just want to bring that show and maybe that book, into our discussion, because it does have a lot of the same themes. And I think, Christina, you wanted to say something about it in particular.
Yeah. Jules, when you were talking about this idea of like queer people actually have sort of an evolutionarily or reproductively relevant purpose, there's somebody who's interviewed in, I think, episode 2 of the podcast. I don't remember who this person is, but
and we should say we've only heard 2 episodes of this podcast. It goes longer, so, keep that in mind.
But this person says, basically, the existence of queer animals, if we want to call them that, means that sex doesn't have to just be about reproduction, and that reproduction doesn't have to be the only purpose in life or the only sort of driving impulse in living, which I think is the kind of message that can be very meaningful to people living under, like, in the society that we're living in, with all the messages we're receiving and shame in Italian that's put upon us for not necessarily reproducing or having reproductive sex or expressing our genders in a reproductively normative way. But the way the person talks about it in the podcast, I think they do find it very meaningful, because they say, it means I'm not a biological accident, and I can have other purposes. I can be a leader. I can be an aunt. I can spend my time doing this and investing in the community and da-da-da. And I'm glad that person, and I'm sure many others, do find meaning and excitement in the idea that I'm not just an aberration doing something that, doesn't necessarily harm anyone, but maybe isn't valuable. But I personally feel a little bit like I don't really care if I have a larger purpose for the human race. Like, maybe I actually want to be a wrench in that system. And I do find a lot of joy in doing the things that maybe being a parent wouldn't allow me to have as much time to do, like being an aunt and, throwing parties, penguin circuit parties, what have you.
Yeah, I think that actually might be a good place for us to take a short break. And when we come back, I think we can continue talking about that and sort of put these two shows together because there definitely are overlaps. So let's take a quick break. Okay, we are back. One of the things that I really appreciated in the podcast was that there was one person quoted somewhat in passing that says same-sex animals mostly have sex because it feels good, right? They have erogenous zones that they want to stimulate. And that felt really important to me, especially after watching the documentary that we were talking about before on Peacock. They're animals. They're just doing like animal things, right? Does that make them gay? Are we only gay because it feels good? Like, so this is where we've been touching on this already, but this is where I think it gets really thorny and weird. And I want us to just kind of dig into I think to me, what's the core problem here or question, which is, can nature be queer, right? Like, is this framework both of these media products are putting onto the natural world, does it make sense?
I mean, I feel very confident saying this as someone who inadvertently has spent many years having to think about it. Yeah, I mean, nature can be queer insofar as that word is, essentially meaningless and is just meant to encompass like everything, everywhere, all at once. So it just kind of has no particular meaning anymore. And for me, no, animals cannot be gay. Animals cannot be trans. Not even all people are able to fall into those categories. They haven't been around forever. Yeah. They're not natural in the sense, unless you want to say, well, literally everything is natural insofar as everything in the entire planet transpires under the rubric of nature. But those are just philosophical, semantic, taxonomic games, right?
And I think this brings us to maybe a closing question, which is like, what is this for? What is this for now, right? I think one of the things that it felt like it cheapened for me, and I'm curious to hear Jules talk more about this, you mentioned it earlier, is the trans experience in particular. It feels like it does not map well with this at all. I found that those comparisons extremely iffy and strange. The clownfish that you mentioned, among others. There's something in the zeitgeist that feels like making this argument, this appeal to nature, now.
Yeah, I think it's a liberal claim that's just actually very conservative, possibly the most conservative claim you could make. And it's also not new. I mean, that's the thing for me, the trans animals. I mean, I agree that the capacity to change sex is biologically encoded in the human species and quite a number of other species, and that plenty of species on this planet, more probably plant than animal, don't really have two sexes. There's no particular meaning to derive from that. And the reason I know that is that when I wrote my first book, I found that the mainline history of science in the 19th and 20th century already argued there were not two human sexes. There were no such things as exclusive men and women. And that, in fact, the ability to change sex seemed like a completely biologically determined capacity. And that was taken to be a really great way to engage in race science and eugenics and plan the racial perfection of the human species and the elimination of undesirable traits. It also is the foundation of modern trans medicine. The biological plasticity in the body is real and observed. That's why if you swap your hormones, like, hello, you can grow tits, you can grow a beard. Like, that's just that's the thing your body can do. There's nothing particularly emancipatory about that. And it did not lead to trans people having a good time. It led to the exact opposite of that. And so if I think ahead to unfortunately, a Supreme Court case that's going to happen next year, and I think about, I'm sure arguments will be made that science is on the side of transition and that, in fact, it's a completely, unremarkable thing to do. And those might be true. I don't disagree with those statements. In no way do I believe they will be politically efficacious. And I don't think they have any inherent value in their own. And to me, that's just sort of the fear driving conservative arguments in this moment, conservative arguments that are pro queer and trans. I just, constantly think it's worth thinking about how much we give up in hoping that those will work and just actually wrestling with the unfortunate fact that they don't. Science is political. And there's no, politically innocent science to follow here. If nature and animals have anything to offer us, surely it's a little bit more interesting than reflecting ourselves as we think we are or hope we are today back to ourselves, as if we find who we are by looking at penguins. I just don't think that's what we really want or need.
To your point about the Supreme Court, I know the book Biological Exuberance, that is sort of the foundational text for the podcast, was actually cited in an amicus brief in Lawrence v. Texas, which struck down sodomy bans. So, yeah, I will not be surprised if it's also cited in the case you're talking about. But yeah, it feels very much to me like we're clearly on the defensive here if we're trying to use the sexual variety among animals to support our ability to live like full and free and safe lives. It's actually kind of sad to me to think about. And yeah, there's part of me that understands the idea that maybe this could be used to disprove the idea that trans identity is a social contagion or something, because but I think it's very easy to see the differences between what's happening among clownfish and what's happening among trans human beings in 2024. I think conservatives, are smart enough to make that argument too.
And additionally, one point that one of my partners made when we were watching this is like, the people who hate queer people, who hate queer and trans people, are not probably the kind of people that are going to be convinced by scientific arguments anyway, right? Like an appeal to nature or science is not going to be the thing that wins them over. So if this is like an emerging political strategy, I just think it is, as we've been saying, I think it's a sort of dead end one. And also, as Jules has really pointed out, a very compromised one historically. So I think we should end it there. But folks should definitely go check out both of these things if you want to. A Queer Planet is streaming now on Peacock, and A Field Guide to Gay Animals is rolling out wherever you get your podcasts. I think we recommend the podcast a little bit more than the doc, but but go check those out and let us know what you think about it at outwardpodcast@slate.com.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this episode, but before we go, we of course have your updates to the gay agenda. And Bryan, would you like to kick us off?
I would love to. I'm going to cheat and have two, but I'll keep them very quick. One is for fun. It's called Dead Boy Detectives. It is a really excellent, very queer show on Netflix that I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about, so that's why I wanted to surface it for us. It takes place in the Neil Gaiman Sandman universe, so if you're into that whole thing, you'll be familiar with some of what's going on here. But it's much more of like a YA CW style show, but the writing is really good and the performances are great. Two older teen ghosts. One is an E.M. Forster type from the early 20th century named Edwin, and the other is an 80s British punk called Charles. They have teamed up to solve paranormal mysteries and help other ghosts move on. There's a medium entangled with a demon. There's a super campy witch. There's bureaucrats from the afterlife. It's really fun. But yeah, it's genuinely scary. It's funny. It's entertaining. But the queerest part of it is done really well. It centers around the Edwin character, the sort of like the Forrester-esque character who's struggling with his attraction to Charles, as well as some super sultry advances from the local cat king. And so the way that he navigates all of that is really, really lovely and interesting. So it's a great summer binge. The second one is called Disco Soundtrack of a Revolution.
Watch this.
You should do it. This is a documentary that's streaming on PBS. It's 3 parts. And instead of just like focusing on, Studio 54 and the sort of rise and fall narrative that is typical of these kinds of things, it really digs into the musical development itself through a handful of particular records that it features. And it really shows you how from soul and R&B, like by introducing this hi-hat pattern, you have disco and then on into house. So you get that kind of musicological thing, which is fascinating. And then, of course, as it has to be, it's full of amazing Black and brown queer people who invented and created the world around this sound, only to see it, blown up into a crass sort of cultural Saturday Night Fever phenomenon and eventually get blown up in a baseball stadium in Chicago or football stadium, one or the other. The disco demolition of 1979. So you get all of that, but it's just really wonderful. And it with all the disco sort of vocabulary that's in our pop music now, I think it's really worth going back and understanding where that came from. So Disco Soundtrack of a Revolution on PBS is excellent.
Can't wait.
Christina, what do you have?
I'm going to recommend I Kissed a Girl. It's a show on the BBC.
Shocking.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend Kissing Girls. No. This is a show you can, in the US, I think you have to watch it on a VPN. It's a BBC reality show hosted by Danny Minogue.
Oh, no way.
Do you know who that is?
Yeah, of course. Why? A child of the empire.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense because I was like, who? Like, this is Kylie's sister, probably. Spells Danny with 2 N's and 2 I's. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But it's a queer reality dating show. The host is a straight woman who, Danny, I think, probably is in her contract that every time she walks out, all of the contestants have to be like, wow, you look amazing. Oh my God, so hot. The format of this show is there's maybe 10 lesbians living in this Italian villa who they get paired up by producers when they meet for the first time. And so, they're arriving at the villa and each of them have to meet by, before they say a word to the other person, kissing. So they all start out by kissing a person. And then the whole show is like, do you stick with that person? Do you start to have a relationship with another person? It's so shallow. And it's mostly Brits on the show, I think. And I loved it so much. I've seen 3 of the episodes. I'm dying to see more. And I'm not usually a reality show kind of person, although I did love the Queer Ultimatum. But it's just fun to watch lesbians lesbianing. And there's some actually kind of sweet moments where this one contestant who is a pro soccer player actually kind of unpacks the word lesbian and how she's felt really uneasy about calling herself that because there's some sort of like, internalized homophobia. And she kind of weeps about it and everyone supports her. And it's just very sweet. Some of them are very hot and some of them are very awkward. Many of them are both. And it's just such a fun summer watch. I can't recommend it enough. Again, it's called I Kissed a Girl. You might have to watch it on VPN. It's a BBC show, which, yeah, a lot of people were like, wow, I can't believe that's BBC. But BBC is very different from like PBS. It really encompasses a wide variety of programming. So unsurprising.
I mean, that literally just sounds like candy. I've been missing a messy queer reality dating show.
Get into it.
Love a chance to listen to some accents, which I will not try to reproduce on this podcast.
What are you recommending this month?
Well, I am recommending something from my friends and comrades over at the Pinko Collective. That's, not your mother's gay communists, but they've just announced the release of a really beautiful 100-page book of photos, interviews, and art from queer Palestinians, including people who remain in Gaza right now. And it's titled Queer Palestine. And so it's guest edited by Iman Abdelhadi, Kalim Hawa, and Jasper Sa'a. And, it just looks absolutely stunning. I'm just starting to see it circulate around on social media from some beloveds of mine over in New York who are Pinko folks. And so I encourage folks to check it out. All the proceeds from the sale of this project are actually funding directly relief for 2 of the people who are interviewed in it. One who's in Gaza City and another one who has evacuated to Cairo. So it's like a really heart-wrenching but stunning, aesthetically achievement and a really important collection. And I think something I know I've been thinking a lot about and talking to a lot of people about is like some of the political grammar right now for the X is also Y, Palestine is also a queer issue, which it doesn't always make sense to me. This is the version that makes sense to me. This is the version that is really galvanizing and I think worth spending some time with. And so, yeah, definitely recommend Queer Palestine, this new collection, which is coming out from the Pinko Collective.
That sounds so cool. That's it for our show this week. Listeners, thank you so much for being with us. And we always love to hear your feedback, love to get your topic ideas, always want your queries at outwardpodcast@slate.com. And just a reminder, by joining Slate Plus, you'll get ad-free podcasts, extra segments on shows like Working, and you'll never hit a paywall on the Slate site. To learn more, go to slate.com/outwardplus. Our show was produced by the ultimate political lesbian macaque, Palace Shaw. If you like Outward, please subscribe to us in your podcast app, tell your friends about it, rate and review the show so other people can find it. It was so fun to be back with you 2 this week.
The
Jules.
best.
The best. Stay gay.
Stay gay.